Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Estonia once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that has featured on the channel once before. So the last beer I had from this brewery was a really nice one. It was quite an unusual style that you don't see all that often from kind of newer generation craft breweries actually, but this brewery are one of the big boys in the Estonian beer scene. They try a lot of different things, so they are definitely worth checking out if you get the chance. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is another one that struck me as being potentially being very interesting, so hopefully it turns out that way, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Jüri, which is to the southeast of Tallinn, the capital city in the northwest of the country, and we're going to have a look at my second beer from Tankr Brewery. So this particular beer is called Nihiru. It comes in at 10.5% ABV, and they're describing this one as a Scotch barrel-aged rye wine. So yeah, it's also part of their Black Pearl series, which seems to be their barrel-aged series. There's a few barley wines and imperial stouts have been released as part of this. But yeah, we got this beer here in Sweden as part of the Tillfälligt temporary assortment, and I believe it was released in February of 2021. I've had this beer sitting for a little while, but it's a rye wine. It will last actually. But when I saw this one on the shelf, I was just like, you know, I have to have this. But this is my first Swedish bought Estonian beer in quite some time actually. All the other ones I've been reviewing have been the ones that I brought back with me from my trip over there. The last Tankr beer that I had was the Ketzer, which is their Flanders Red, and that one was bought at Harjumaa in Tallinn actually, which is an awesome beer shop. They've got links of course to Lehe Prulikoda, who are another big player in the Estonian beer scene. So yeah, definitely curious to see how this one turns out. Hopefully it's another interesting beer, as I said, and hopefully you guys enjoy this. So yeah, let's crack on with this then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Tankr Brewery before, and hopefully we can get a hold of a few more of their beers and add to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Estonian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite gradually at the moment because I still have a few Estonian beers to work my way through. And as always, do please get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Tankr Brewery once again. So Tankr Brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Jüri, which is a few kilometres to the southeast of Tallinn, the capital city in the northwest of Estonia. But the three men behind the company are Ryan Suske, Jānis Tamala and Ants Laidam. So Ryan arrived in Tallinn from San Diego in California before the beer scene had really taken off in Estonia, and he just missed his American beers, so his solution was to start brewing his own. But together he and Jānis began brewing in Jānis's garage, and then they later teamed up with gypsy brewer Ants Laidam to form the company officially in 2014, and this was after they'd met him at a homebrewers meeting. But at this point, Ants had already established a brand called Tankr, and so they decided that they were going to continue with this, and they searched for a premises. But the first brewery that they had was located in Vaida, and they began production there back in April of 2015. So they started off with a 1,000 litre brew kit and 8,000 litres of fermentation capacity, and by the end of their first kind of official year of production, they produced around 40,000 litres of beer. But they installed an automated bottling line in 2016, and by the end of that year they were producing around 12,000 litres of beer per month. But a bit later on in 2018 they started planning further expansion, and they used crowdfunding to help them fund their new brewery in Jüri. But the new brewery opened in May of 2019, and this can produce around 45,000 litres of beer per month, which is pretty impressive. But they still have their other brewery in Vaida, which is now used to produce and age sour beers. But apparently they export around 1/3 of their total production, and that's quite common in Estonia actually, because you know Estonia is only about 1.3 million people or something like this. So a lot of the Estonian beer that's produced actually goes away for export. So to export about 1/3 of their product is not uncommon the Estonian breweries actually. I know that Pohjala, Lehe, and I think Puasta as well export around 1/3 of their stuff actually, which is pretty cool. And the Estonian beer, as I've told you before, is a very high standard. But as of May 2021, these guys have produced around 200 different kinds of beer. Like I said to you earlier, they are a very prolific brewery. They're not afraid to try different styles. And yeah, it is a brewery that I need to try a few more things from. In fact, I only brought back the Ketzer from Estonia, but the next time I go over there, I will make sure I try a good few of the different tanker beers. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Tanker Brewery for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. But yeah, that is your brewery history for the moment. Let's get on and actually have a look at this beer itself then. So as you can see, the artwork on this one is, you know, quite straightforward, but I still think it's really tasteful. You can see the sort of wooden age lines, or annual rings, I guess we would say, the sort of annual rings of the wood in the tea there. I think that's a nice little touch. But yeah, Black Pearl series, there you've got your barcode and all of this, and there's the name, Nihiru. So yeah, I had a little look at what Nihiru actually was, and it seems that quite a few of these beers are named after atolls, islands and things out in Polynesia, I think French Polynesia, to be specific. This one, Nihiru, of course, is an atoll in French Polynesia, but apparently it's also a character from an anime called Dodoro, if I'm remembering rightly. I think I know which one that is, but yeah, not really into anime at all, to be honest with you. But yeah, apparently that's another thing that it could have been, because I looked up some of the other names because they sounded a little bit Japanese actually, and I thought, oh, is this, what is it, a, you know, is it an anime sort of thing? But no, apparently they're all named after different atolls. One of the other ones I saw was like Takatoko or something like this, or Tatatoko, I don't know. But yeah, the names of these ones all come from Polynesian atolls and islands, which is pretty cool. But yeah, like I said to you, this one is a 10.5% rye wine, and as far as I can figure, a rye wine is basically a barley wine, but with a little bit of rye added into the malt base. A component of the malt base is rye. So yeah, as we know, the barley wine is basically the big brother of the double IPA. So you've got Paleo is the sort of youngest member of the family, if you like. Then you've got the IPA, you've got the double IPA, and then you've got the barley wine, and then rye wine. As I say, it is just it's just got a little bit of a rye component to it. You also get wheat wines, and I've reviewed a few of those on the channel over the while, but it's only quite recently that I came into contact with a rye wine. So this is only my second or third rye wine that I've had actually. But 330ml can, this one, I think I paid like 70, maybe 70 Swedish krona for this one, maybe 80, let's say 80, that sounds a bit more kind of reasonable for a big 10.5% beer like this. So I think I paid like 80 Swedish kronas for this, so that's about €8. They're selling it on their own website for somewhere, I think it was about €6.50 or €7, something like that. So, you know, for an import beer, that's not bad. So yeah, about 80 Swedish krona, €8, maybe about £7.25, something like this. And then for those of you watching in the States, and that would be maybe, what would that be, maybe about $9, maybe a little bit over $9 American, something like this. But yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. A Scotch barrel-aged rye wine. I'd be very curious to know what Scotch barrels they've actually used, but there wasn't any information really on the beer on the website and things like that. It didn't say what barrels they'd used, unfortunately, but would have been interesting to know, because you know, if you know the distillery, you can get some of the ideas about the barrel aging component of the beer. But yeah, this looks as if it's quite interesting. So before the head disappears, that's just about a quarter finger of a frothy, I would say light beige coloured head, but you know, 10.5%, it is going to disappear quite quickly. That looks as if it's lined up nicely, so my OCD is happy. But yeah, that head has just faded away to leave a little foamy ring around the edge of the glass, and a few kind of wisps on the top of the beer. So yeah, quarter finger of a frothy kind of light beige head on this one. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, But yeah, it looks pretty nice. In terms of colour, if we shine the light through this one, you can see that this is a kind of deep dark sort of mahogany rosewood type colour that's coming out of this one. I think it goes really nicely. It's actually quite a hazy beer, this one, I have to say, and I guess that's the rye that's probably going to do that. Rye can make beers pretty hazy, in fact. But yeah, it looks very, very interesting. So yeah, lovely dark, lovely deep rosewoody, dark mahogany type colour, this one. If you shine the light through it, you do get a little bit more of a kind of light mahogany type note, type appearance on the edges. But yeah, it looks like a nice beer, this one. And not out with the realms of a possibility for a rye wine. Usually rye wines and barley wines, of course, have some sort of dark, deep woody colour like this. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use, 2, the length of your wort boil, and then barrel aging and adjuncts can have an effect on that as well. I think in this case, you know, maybe the barrel aging would have a little bit of effect, maybe darken it up a little bit, but yeah, the colour of your beer, as I say, when you've got, you know, it's the colour, the type of malts that you use in the first instance determine the magnitude of the colour, and then the wort boil, you get the caramelisation of the sugars. So the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker beer out of it. And a sort of rye wine like this, I would assume that this one would have a boil time of about 4 to 6 hours, you know, something like that. So yeah, that will probably account for a little bit of the nice dark colour that you're getting in this one. So yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we got on with this one. Nothing particularly surprising about the appearance of this beer. That smells very nice. It does. Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely smelling beer, this one. But yeah, we can this one, there's so much going on in it, it's kind of difficult to sort of pinpoint a point to begin, actually. But yeah, I'm going to say straight away, it's a beautiful smelling beer that you will spend a long time smelling this one if you have a go at it. But with the, I guess we can start with the barrel aging component, because that's what we usually do with these barrel aged beers. So underneath everything, you can smell this lovely, smooth, kind of oaky quality out of it. Within that oak, though, you do get a little touch of a slightly spicy note. You do get a little bit of that kind of grainy character. And for me, yeah, it's Scotch whisky. Compared to the American bourbons and things, Scotch whisky is a little bit more grainy and things like this, whereas the American ones are very kind of slick and sort of big and brown sugary. So you can definitely smell that little touch of the spicy kind of grainy note of the Scotch whisky coming out of this beer. So yeah, lovely smooth oak, a little bit of the kind of the kind of distinctive, slightly grainy, spicy Scotch whisky component in there as well. But yeah, the aroma of that base there is just lovely. You can definitely get a wee bit of vanilla out of it too, and I think going from the aroma that comes out of this one, it smells like it's a more kind of citrusy leaning Scotch whisky barrel that they've used in here, maybe a Speyside or something like this. It would smell more like that. I mean, it could be a Highland, but you know, when you start to get out to the Isles and stuff like that, you get a lot of peated whiskies and things like that. I don't think it's an Islay whiskey or a I don't think it's an Islay or a Skye whiskey that's been used for this one. I think it's more likely to be some sort of Speyside, actually, because Speyside ones, in my experience, tend to be the more kind of citrusy and sort of smooth ones, actually. But yeah, there's a lovely little bit of woodiness and leatheriness to the barrel aging component as well. Couldn't tell you exactly what distillery it is, of course. I forget how many distilleries there are in Scotland these days, but the barrel aging component of this beer forms a lovely, lovely backbone. Smooth oak, you can smell a little touch of that kind of slightly grainy Scotch whisky component that's in there. You get the leathery notes, you get a little bit of that kind of nutty kind of thing out of it as well. The barrel aging component of this beer is absolutely lovely. I wish I knew what barrels they'd used for this. That would be really interesting to know for sure. But whatever it is, it works it really adds a real depth to this beer. So I need to try a few more in this Black Pearl series actually. I'll need to ask my friend Einar if he can pick up a few of these for me and just keep them until the next time I go to Estonia. Then they'll be nice and aged. But yeah, the aroma of this beer is absolutely lovely. But yeah, that is your barrel aged component actually. Lovely vanilla, leathery, kind of nutty notes out of this one. And yeah, it's great. But on top of that though, you can get a little bit of that sort of, the other thing we need to remember with this beer is it is a rye wine, not a straight up barley wine. So some of the graininess that you're getting out of this beer will come from the rye itself. And in fairness, sitting on top of that kind of woody component, you do get a little bit of a nice German kind of rye bread note out of this. You can smell a little bit of the kind of more bread crusty elements to the beer also. So yeah, a nice wholemealy rye brown bready note kind of sitting on top of the woody component, but there's a lot of brown sugar with that as well. You get a nice kind of treacly molasses sort of thing. You can also pick up notes of a kind of straight up caramel. I don't know if it's really got it doesn't really have a kind of toasty brown sugary note to it, this one. It does come across as being more kind of treacly and more sort of sweet and caramelly. There's maybe a little bit of that Werther's Original kind of a little bit of that sort of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing in there as well actually. But the brown sugary notes you get out of this beer are absolutely lovely. It really works very, very well. But to be honest with you, I think that covers the sort of malty barrel aging side of this beer. You know, it's got some real depth to it, this one, and the barrel aged backbone to this one I think is going to be very interesting when we taste the beer. But on the hoppy side of things then, what can we get out of this? I wonder what hops they've used in this, actually, come to think of it. Could it just be could they have used a little bit of Northern Brewer or Summit or, you know, Eureka or something like that? It's also a very interesting one to use in sort of barley wine, rye wines and things, because they give you the big red fruits. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things, there's a wee touch of earthiness to this one. You do have a little bit of a floral character in there and a nice little bit of grassiness, but remember, with big beers like this, the longer you keep them, of course, the more the hoppy component is going to drop out, and this beer is barrel aged as well, so you're not going to get so much of a green component out of these, but you can pick up a little bit of grassiness, a wee touch of floral character and a little bit of earthiness, so bear that in mind with this beer. But on the fruity side of things, it's lovely. It almost has a wee bit of a kind of fruitcake type note to it, this one. There is an element of cakiness, I think, starts to come out of this beer later on. But yeah, on the fruity side of things, we have a sort of, there's a little bit of a raisiny note to this one. You've got a wee bit of a kind of, there is a bit of a kind of juicier plum in there, but it's maybe a little bit more pruny actually. It's got a little bit more of that dried fruit vibe to it. So a bit of a pruny note, a little bit of a kind of figgy element in there, some sultanas for sure, and a wee bit of a sort of blackcurranty, and a little bit of blackberry as well. But yeah, there's definitely a sort of sultana, pruny, dried fruity element to this one. But you know, raisins. It has got a wee bit of that raisiny and blackberry sort of sharpness to it. So I really like how that. Goes together actually. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer and this kind of cakey vibe that it has is lovely as well. But yeah, I think it's about time that we crack into this beer. The aroma of it is lovely, and we could sit and examine that for ages on its own. But let's have a taste of this one then. But definitely take a bit of time to ponder it over before you get stuck in. But yeah, this one is the Nihiru, 10.5% Scotch barrel aged rye wine from Tanker Brewery in Jüri, near Tallinn in Estonia. Very curious about this beer. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, terviseks. Oh yeah. That is a very, very nice beer once again. Not surprised. But yeah, this beer, it very much works. You can say that for sure. It's interesting too, because the first impression I have of it is that it's quite a little bit more grainy, and it's got a wee bit more dryness to it as well, actually. And, well, maybe dryness isn't right. It's got a little bit more kind of spiciness in the barrel aging component than the Aroma would have you believe. But it's another solid beer, and you can tell straight away from the sort of thickness of the beer. This is quite a long boil rye wine, this one. This has probably been in the, this has probably had a wort boil of like 6 hours or something like that for sure, because you just feel those big thick caramelly sugars out of it. But yeah, gets a thumbs up from me. I need to try one of the kind of regular barley wines and the and one of the imperial stouts from this series for sure. So yeah, it really, I get the feeling that this beer is going to mellow out really nicely though. But yeah, let's start off in the same way with the flavour then. So the backbone of this beer obviously is the kind of oaky, woody component from the barrel aging. So it does have a lovely degree of smoothness to it. But like I said, the difference with Scotch barrel aging for me is that there is an element of slightly, you know, a slight dryness, a kind of spiciness almost to the wood there, and you get that coming out of this beer quite early on. So yeah, lovely smooth oaky quality to it, but then you get the drier components, just the wood almost kind of dries out just as the flavour progresses, if you like. But yeah, lovely smooth oaky note to it. If you go to the front if you go to the front half of that middle third of your palate, you will get a few of the, you get a wee touch of vanilla to it, but then you start to get the kind of leathery notes from the whiskey as well. And if you go towards the back half of that middle third of your palate and then into the back third of the palate as well, that's when you get the slightly more kind of grainy components, if you like, from the whiskey that's been aged in this this whiskey barrel originally. But like I was suspecting from the aroma, it does come across as if it's a more kind of citrusy whiskey that's been in this one, potentially a Speyside. Could be a Highland, of course, as well. Yeah, it's definitely more of a kind of citrusy type whiskey that's been aged in whatever barrel they're using here. But yeah, the woody notes out of this one are the woody notes that you get out of this from the barrel aging are lovely, and they just linger there into the aftertaste. They sort of become, they start off quite subtle and then they just become more and more prominent as you go on. But I can certainly appreciate how that goes in this one. A lot of people prefer bourbon barrel aging because of the sweetness that you get out of it, but you know, being a native Scot, if you like, for me it's a little bit kind of nostalgic in a sense. So yeah, the barrel aging component of this one for me is really interesting, and it also makes the beer quite quirky, of course, but that is your barrel aged component to this one. Let's focus on the middle third of the palate now. So on top of that, you get a lovely little bit of that. You can feel the sort of brown rye bready quality coming out of this, and that forms a kind of base layer there. If you go to either end of that middle third of your palate, you get a wee bit more of a kind of thicker bread crusty. You get a bit more of a kind of bread crusty element out of it. It's like a nice German rye bread. I do miss the bakeries from when I used to live in Germany. Of course, you got some beautiful fresh breads in there. But yeah, a little bit of a kind of rye bread crusty element in there, and then the kind of greenier elements kind of sitting in the middle. But in the dead centre of your palate, that's where you get a lot of the brown sugar component to this beer. So as I said earlier, you can tell with this beer, it does have a nice kind of treacly, molassesy component to this one. You can feel the sort of thickness of it there. So in the very dead centre of your palate, you get a lovely, quite concentrated treacle molasses, highly caramelised sugary note there. But as you move further out from that, it's sort of the caramelly notes, it sort of becomes a more sweet caramel, and then as you progress further out, it becomes a little bit more like a kind of butterscotchy Werther's Original type flavour that you get from this one. And you'll also notice that the sort of leathery flavours from the whiskey and the bit of nuttiness, particularly on the front half, that front third of your tongue, they sort of merge with the more kind of butterscotchy side of the brown sugary elements there. But yeah, the most complexity that you get in this beer is in that middle third of your palate, and I think what we've done now just describes it quite succinctly. But on the back third of your palate, let's move on to that. So in the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a little bit of a sort of almost cakey build up in there, and just a wee touch of a grainy dryness. But then yeah, the back third of your palate, you can feel the nice, you can feel that sort of, how would we say, you can feel the some more of the kind of graininess coming out of the beer. You get the more kind of roasty toasty elements of the wooden barrel at the back there, and a little bit of a kind of graininess, and then on top of that you get some of the kind of yeasty components. You get a little bit of the more airy yeast there. So at the back of the beer, on the back third of your palate, the flavour is just a little bit taller. So yeah, wood, rye bread, and then the yeasty sort of notes there. And as you move forward, it kind of condenses down, but as you go into the middle third of your palate, it condenses down quite a little bit, and you get all those nice flavours kind of squashed a little bit together. But yeah, it's interesting that, and I wouldn't say the kind of yeasty component of this beer feels as kind of airy as compared with some of the other beers like the New England IPAs and so on. But yeah, that is the middle part of your palate for me. That's the malty and the barrel aging side of things. The hoppy component, back corners of the palate, you do get a little bit of earthiness out of this one, and that builds a good bridge with the sort of rye grainy vibe that the beer has. But as you move further forward, the earthiness spreads forward a little bit, and then as you reach the front corners of the palate, you do get a little touch of a kind of floral aromatic component out of this one. And it's interesting that, to be honest. I would love to know what hop has been used in this. It could be a little bit of Northern Brewer and potentially something American as well. There's just something familiar about the green component in this beer. The power of the kind of grassy component, but the smoothness of it, that makes me wonder, yeah, there could be a bit of Northern Brewer and potentially something American like Eureka or whatever on top of that. Or it could be, you know, Chinook. If you put Chinook in beers like this, it can often be quite interesting and give you some of these lovely fruity notes. Chinook is an interesting one to use in barley wines and stuff like that. A bit of Cascade as well can also give you some complexity, so it could be something like that in this beer as well. But round the front curve of the palate, you can detect some of the kind of grassy notes lingering there, and it's got a wee touch of zestiness as well. So yeah, but like I say, this beer has been barrel aged. I've had it a little bit, so the hoppy components, the green component will drop down a little bit. But let's focus on the fruity components of this beer. So yeah, front third of your palate then. Border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a kind of more cakey build up there again, and then you get a wee bit of a kind of grainy dryness sitting on top. But then the, how would you say, the sort of cakiness sits at the very back of that front third of your palate, but the base of the front third of your palate in this beer, it's like a very smooth bready note there, and maybe a little bit, as I say, a little bit cakey. The beer does have a wee bit of a kind of boozy, fruit cakey type vibe to it. But yeah, sitting on the back half of that front third of your palate, it's got a sort of pruny and kind of sultana type vibe. But then you get some raisins sitting on top of it. As you progress further forward towards the tip of your tongue, there's a wee bit of a, there is a little touch of a, I would say, it does get a little bit more kind of figgy almost, and then it becomes a little bit more kind of black curranty underneath, and then sitting on top of that you've got a more oily blackberry component out of this one. So yeah, I really like how all of that pieces together in this beer. Actually, the kind of berry components you get out of this one are the dried fruit notes you get are very nice, so the cakey element works, and then you've got a little bit more of a kind of juicy blackberry note out of the beer further on as well. So yeah, the way that this beer kind of fits together, I think, works really, really nicely. So yeah, I think that kind of summarises the flavour of this one very well. It's got a little bit, the barrel aging, you know, is a little bit dry, which is kind of distinctive of Scotch whisky barrel aging. You've got a lovely kind of bready component to the beer, but I think it does progressively get a little bit more kind of grainy the further you go into it, and it is a rye wine, so you'd expect that the fruity notes become a little bit more cakey, and you've got just a little bit of a green component in there as well. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this flavour. This is a really nice and really interesting beer, but if you're wanting a big sweet kind of barley wine thing, this one maybe isn't the right one for you. You maybe want something that's more bourbon barrel aged, for example, and I'm sure the last dry wine I had might have been bourbon barrel aged, come to think of it. So yeah, bear that in mind. With a Scotch barrel aging is always a little bit more dry and potentially a little bit more spicy, I would say. But let's round off the review with the mouthfeel then. So with this one, this beer, it's kind of right in the middle of the full-bodied part of the spectrum. The carbonation is very smooth. It's got a bit of slickness to it. Remember, you will always sacrifice a bit of the thickness of your beer when you do the barrel aging. You get the infused flavours at the expense of a little bit of the thickness. But yeah, that works in this beer for sure. Like I say, the malty kind of barrel aging backbone to this one has a wee bit of dryness to it and a little touch of an almost spicy character, but it does sweeten up a little bit. The more that you drink of this one, you get these big, highly caramelized, treacly flavors out of it. But as I say, it's a little bit. It does have a little bit of a. It does give you that kind of dry component to it, which I think works really nicely. But on the hoppy side of things, it's got a wee bit of bitterness, but yeah, the green component doesn't play too big a role here. But maybe this beer sits somewhere in the region of 40-ish IBUs, something like that. And that's, but this is hard to tell because of the sort of slight spiciness that the beer has. But the fruity components for me, there's a bit of cakiness almost backing it up there, like a sort of spongy fruit cake. You've got a wee bit of sharpness too, and some nice kind of soft dried fruit components to this beer. So yeah, it's a really interesting beer, this one, and I'm certainly glad that I picked this up. No regrets about that at all. Certainly worth paying paying the €8 for it, for something a bit different. You don't come across a Scotch barrel aged rye wine every day, let's just say that. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this review. So yeah, this one was the Nihiru 10.5% Scotch barrel aged rye wine from the Black Pearl series at Tankard Brewery in Jüri in Estonia. Really interesting one. Nice to review another Estonian beer for you here on the channel, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my take on this one. We've still got about 5 or 6 Estonian beers to work our way through over the next little while, and some quite interesting ones coming up, I'm sure, actually. So I hope you guys enjoy those. But yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from the Black Pearl series and from Tankard Brewery generally. Hopefully we can review a few more from them over the next little while. Until the next time, check out my social media, check out this brewery. Slàinte, Skål, cheers, and Tervisex. I'll catch you guys in the next review. The Nihiru from Tankard over in Jüri in Estonia. Cheers.